Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Halcyon Podcast. My name's Lorne Risley. I'll be your host for this episode as always. Apologies for the throat and apologies for the delay in any content. The reason will become clear shortly. It's been a trying few weeks for me. A lot of ups and downs, lots of uncertainty, lots of introspection. And as a result, I think I'm probably going to steer the channel away from doing reviews and content like that because, to be perfectly honest, I don't think it helps anybody. I don't think I offer an introspective or a view on things that's different from anything to promise regular content that's of a high enough quality to sort of stand alongside everything else that's going on YouTube. So rather than get rid of the channel in its entirety, and also rather than kind of backing away from YouTube as a vocation or a way of expressing myself, I'm going to change the style of the channel and the style of the content you're going to be getting. I'm probably going to stick to a podcast format because it's the easiest to produce and also allows me to sort of wax lyrical on things. But people can decide to listen or not. It's entirely up to them. I always appreciate when people take the time to listen. But what I think I want to do with this channel is use it as a form of catharsis for me, because that's what it's always been, in terms of a creative outlet, in terms of something to keep me busy, keep my mind occupied and things of that nature. And at the moment, my mind turns to a couple of things which I want to talk about on this podcast, and people can tune in or out if they want to. And again, apologies for the voice, but I want to talk about life. Vague, I know, but still, bear with me here, people. Life owes people nothing, but at the same time, we see what other people have, and we see the way, especially the way social media governs things, how we would assume other people live their lives. But life holds no promise for anybody, no guarantee, no assurance. And worst of all, people are even worse than life, because they will life at least doesn't ever make you the promise, people do. Very recently, I've had a couple of personal issues that have kind of culminated over the last couple of days to a scenario that I know is going to play out in a certain way. And I guess just from me being a somewhat compassionate individual and a kind of optimist, I'm fighting the idea of the reality of a situation. I'm struggling to understand and process it. I'm also struggling to comprehend why it's happening to a certain degree, deconstruct it, understand it, and try and move on from it. But it is what it is. And what I wanted to try and touch on this podcast is how I maybe differ from a lot of people, in the sense that I do think life should owe you some things. I don't know why I do. I don't know why I think things should be done in a certain way, or it just seems like there's people, not necessarily myself, but there's others that I know who get a raw deal with things. They get shafted by life a lot. And again, a lot of it's down to outward perception. I'm a firm believer that perception is reality. So if you can perceive your world to be a good world, it's a good world. If you perceive your world to be a bad world, it's a bad world. However, the circumstances being what they are, it's a tricky world to live in now. I think with social media being what it is, and with it connecting people across distances that they were never really meant to connect across, you have all sorts of pressures to live up to what a normal relationship would have been 10, 20 years ago as a friend or as a partner or whatever. I know that's hard on me as an individual, because I'm a very introverted person, a loner to a certain extent, and also an individual that I I'm big on reciprocity. I feel like if you give, you should get, and if you get, you should give. And when I feel like a relationship or a partnership or a business venture or whatever in the world is starting to become more one-sided than the other, and it becomes less of a benefit of the other, that's when you need to speak up and say something. And I think in a lot of situations recently, I found myself getting frustrated with my inability to just say, this is the line, I can't cross it. And once it's crossed, it kind of doesn't matter anymore. So I guess a long-winded point on this first part of the podcast is, if you see something in your life that you know is beyond fixing, or that you think could be dealt with initially, at least, before it becomes an issue, then you need to have the courage to do it. I know it's easier said than done, but there's a lot of instances in my life, and this isn't any one instance, where I'll know about something, an issue or a problem or something that's going to come down the line, but I choose to look on the positive side of things to an almost stupid degree, where I will hope against hope that something else will happen, even though logic and even my own sensibilities and my own experience dictates otherwise. I know how things are going to go with work, with some relationships I've been in, with family, with a year, with whatever. Experience is experience, and I value it, because once you've been through something once, I'd like to think you can replicate it. But coming back to the point, my main weakness in life is leaning towards a degree of over-analysis on things. And I think that even talking about it is sometimes hard, and I'll explain why. And I'll finish my point in a moment. Over the last couple of days, I have been tremendously depressed and lonely. And even admitting that is probably going to make people go cringy and turn off and run away and whatever. And I find that odd, because when I see somebody or something in distress, my natural response is usually to drop whatever I'm doing to help. I don't like seeing suffering. I can't abide it. It's not in my nature to be apathetic to people suffering. And I would like to think that if everyone had that same stance on things, that the world would be an infinitely better place, because we'd all know there'd always be somebody. And I think despair is, and that's what, if I categorize it, I think I've been feeling the last couple of days. The root of it all is hope, hoping that it will turn around, hoping that something else will come along, or someone will stick their hand in and rescue the moment. But also the knowledge that you've asked and you've reached out and you've tried to deal with the situation as best you can, and it's just not worked. And you've kind of got to let the situation play out. Now, I've never been the most patient person in the world. So for someone like me, and for others who may have gone through something similar where a bad thing has happened but it's not quite the end and you've got to deal with the repercussions and consequences, it's a hard thing to carry on doing the things you love, or to keep on doing things that make you happy, when you know it's almost tainted by it. And the important thing that I kind of wanted to stress in this part of the podcast is, because I've kind of waxed lyrical for a few minutes and been quite down, and by no means am I okay. And I think just saying that, even if no one listens, even if whatever happens as a result of me posting this, it's cathartic just to admit it and just to say, yeah, I'm not okay. By no stretch of the imagination am I okay right now. And society, people, my friends, family, are going to struggle coping with that as well. And I know that, but you can't help how you feel. And I feel like we live in an age where if apathy is the way we go, then that's fine. But then we have to go down the route of appreciating the fact that people are going to do what they do for themselves. And that's not right either. I feel like I'm going to be tremendously selfish in the coming weeks. Tremendously selfish. I'm going to do things that aren't in my character. I'm going to do things that are irrational. I'm I do things that are stupid. And I almost to a degree don't have a control over that, because these emotions come in waves. If anyone's been through depression or despair, or really struggled with an aspect of their life that's really causing them severe pain, it isn't something that you just deal with constantly. It comes in waves. It hits you and it doesn't let you go, and you sit for hours and hours sometimes just wishing it would go away, wishing the thing that caused you the thing in the first place would just let up for 5 minutes. And then it does. But something happens and you get reminded, and then it comes back and it comes back, and hopefully you have a law of diminishing returns with it, and it gets better and better and better. And it's not very often that I go into this kind of detail on a podcast, but like I said, I feel over the last month or two, I have less and less to offer in terms of a critical insight into gaming, movies or culture. But I can offer an insight into the mind of a person like myself, who is an overthinker, who is a tremendously passionate individual, who strives for other people but not necessarily for himself. And that's a detriment sometimes, because then when you're left behind, which I'll be honest, again, I'm going to be completely honest on this podcast, is going to be an emotional ringer, so props to anyone that's followed through so far. It's more a question that that feeling of being left behind is absolutely horrible, and that's how I feel right now. I feel like there's a song lyric. The world has turned and left me here by Weezer, and it does. And I'd like to think most people know what this feels like, even if they won't talk about it, and if they will talk about it, they'll only talk about it under certain circumstances. But it feels like I've been placed in a spot and the entire world has just turned a few degrees on its axis and left me right where I was, and now I've got to try and figure out a way of catching up, and not only catching up but getting ahead. And the final point I wanted to make on this podcast, because again, this isn't doom and gloom, it's a reality check for me, it's content for you, it's hopefully something that gives people some pause for thought, because if they... The most useful thing I can do with my pain right now is to try and make it constructive. And the only constructive thing I can say is that with all suffering or anguish or despair, there is a way out. It's just you have to be prepared to see the opportunity and seize it. It's not going to come straight away, but you may have to force it. A lot of times I've seen people say something to the effect of, wait, be patient and wait for things. Now, I'm sorry. No one ever got anything in life by sitting around and waiting for things. Patience is a virtue, I understand that. And I understand that sometimes you need to let things lie for a bit. But at the same time, people need to be able to feel the way they feel. They need to be able to live their lives the way they want to live their lives. And as far as I'm concerned right now, I need to be able to live my life the way I want to live it. And that's not being afraid of how I feel in the lows, not being afraid to shout about it at the highs, not worrying about when the lows come that it's going to be forever, not worrying about when the highs come that they won't last. And I would urge every single person, whoever listens to this podcast, whoever listened or watched a show of mine who's come across this one, believe in the ability to get better. Believe in the inevitability of your experience and it's showing through. Know that if you've experienced something, and even though you've got to go through it, yes, it sucks while you're going through it, but you can and you will get through it. And who knows? The way my mind works, it's a weird motherfucker. I might listen to this podcast at some point and remind myself of some of these facts, so that if I'm the only person that ever listens to this podcast, then this is the point I would want to make to my future self, the self that's desperately clawing at opportunities and desperately rushing around trying to find meaning and understanding and a solution to the way I feel, is this: it's not forever. And there are things around you that will make you happier than you could possibly imagine if you're prepared to open your mind to the possibilities. But what I would say is never underestimate people's ability to be apathetic either. I believe in the power of the individual. I believe in people's ability to be good, but I also know that people's ability to be selfish. So if I'm going to offer words of advice for people, it's this. Don't ignore the suffering around you. It's cowardly. It's selfish. It bears no one any benefit. Yes, it's hard. Emotions are hard, but guess what? You've got them too. And just imagine what you would feel like. Just imagine how low and desolate you would feel if you were feeling some kind of unbearable anguish, something you can't process, you can't understand it, you can't accept it. And yet there was no one around you, no one who was there to tell you it was going to be okay. Just imagine that for a second. Imagine how fucking awful that would be. And if you've been through this, you know exactly, and you know why you don't want to go back to that place. But I'm here to tell you one thing. You could be that person for somebody else. Yes, you've been through it, and maybe no one was there for you. That doesn't give you license to now deny it to everybody else and put everyone else in the same basket. It doesn't. And I really wish people would come out of their bubbles to an extent. I'm having to get into a bubble now. It's the one thing I hate doing. I hate having to cut off the world. I hate having to make allowances for the way the world is versus the way it should be. The way it should be is everyone should be there for each other. But they're not. They're there as much as they can prove it to other people. So they can get the brownie points that society then deems them to be a good person or a bad person. You need to stop thinking of it that way. If you're going to be a good person through and through, then you have to be willing to go the extra mile for people. You have to be willing to open up your mind and open up your heart to people in their lowest moments as well as their highest. Because if you can't deal with the lowest, then you don't deserve the highest. It's a meme right now, but it's fucking true. If you cannot handle the lows of life when other people are going through it, then why the hell should you expect anyone else to go through it for you? And trust me when I say this, people, this isn't me preaching to a choir. This isn't me saying this because I'm jealous that other people have had this and I've had. I have been there for so many people, and I will be there for many, many more, because I'm that kind of person. I cannot tolerate suffering. I cannot I cannot abide it. And if one thing comes from this past 2 weeks of being afraid, of being pissed off, of being want to throw people through a window, of being unsure about how I'm going to get up the following day, it's this. It's that it gets better, but it only gets better if everyone pulls together. I believe in the power of the individual, but in order for a person to heal properly and to be able to trust again and love again properly, or for someone to take a hit with a job or a medical condition that's come their way and slap them into a whole new world because now they can't do certain things they used to be able to do, people cannot turn away from that. We all face it sooner or later. Every single person will face adversity of some description in their lives on an emotional basis, physical basis, fiscal basis. Do you really want to live in a world where that isn't the case anymore? I would argue no. And I sit as a person who is currently sat in my house on my own doing nothing but pondering a future that I can't accept right now. But even I know it gets better. Even I know that at one point I have to get over myself and I have to get back on the wagon and I have to go to work, I have to put in the hours, and I have to open my heart and open my mind again. It will not be easy, but it has to be done. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. And if you're going through something right now, if you're feeling low, if you're feeling like no one gives a shit, then I'm here to tell you at least one person's in your corner. At least one. And he's angry, and he's shouty, He's got a raspy voice that makes him sound like some kind of fucking lame-ass cartoon character. And he's some punk on YouTube. But let me tell you something, this punk's right about this, and I won't be argued against when it comes to this. Yes, people protect themselves, and yes, apathy is a big problem in our world thanks to the way technology works and how it promotes selfishness. But it has to change. And I'm going to be advocating it and pontificating it as much as I can. And I hope at least somebody understands that and starts spreading this message. I hope we get over this. I really do. And I hope we stop being so closed off with each other. So, I apologise profusely if you tuned in thinking you were getting sports or boxing or whatever you thought you were getting. But at the moment, I'm going to be selfish and I'm going to put all these on a podcast so I can always remember the fact that there is at least a time where I said it and I knew it to be true. A couple of weeks' time, I might be in the bottom of a bottle, not believing in anything. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. In the meantime, please, I hope whoever listens to this, you're taking care of yourselves, you're looking out for the people around you, you're loving them, and I hope you're pursuing that dream, pursuing that goal of being happy. In the meantime, I've been your host, Dawn Risley. This has been the Halcyon Podcast, an overwhelmingly emotional podcast. Glad we got through it together. Be safe, be smart, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you on the next episode of Halcyon.